My name is David Woods. I'm from York, Maine, and my son and I are the founders of Wiggly Bridge Distillery.
Hey all, Amanda here, and welcome to episode 87 of Great Beer Adventure. Often I'm asked to look at beverages outside of the beer world. I love lots of different drinks, but great craft beverage adventure isn't quite as catchy. So everything must connect back to beer, as is the case today. Today we head to Wiggly Bridge Distillery. You may remember them from our Art of Blending episode we did. They were the ones that brought the amazing spirits to the table. Well, we go right down to the distillery and we compare and contrast how beer and spirits are made.
Hey everybody, I am sitting in a very old barn, getting ready to learn about an amazing process that we have not even a little bit talked about on this show. I am at Wiggly Bridge Distillery, and I walked in and this place smelled amazing. Molasses just hit you so much. It was delicious. I want to jump right in. There is a lot to cover today. This table is covered with microphones, wires, and a lot of liquids. Some little pours and some bigger pours. So I just want to jump right in. There's 4 people sitting here with me right now, and I just want to say thank you so very much for bringing me down here and having me come and talk to you all.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming here.
Yeah, so who wants to start? We need to know who we're talking to. So give me your name, a little bit about yourself that you want to share, and then we'll go from there.
Well, for the sake of brevity, Kevin McGann, brand ambassador here at Wiggly Bridge. I live in York, Maine, and very much into craft cocktails and craft beer.
Wonderful.
I'm Ashley Hamilton. I live right here in York, Maine as well. I am the lead mixologist at Wiggly Bridge. I do our cocktail classes and tours and tastings, the whole kit and caboodle. It's a fun place to be.
Yeah.
My name is David Woods. I'm from York, Maine, and my son and I are the founders of Wiggly Bridge Distillery.
I am Amanda Woods. I'm Dave's daughter-in-law, and I kind of do a little bit of everything here, but more likely I like to be called the marketing diva of Wiggly Bridge.
Nice.
So true.
Isn't it wonderful when you can make up your own title?
Yes, it's wonderful.
Well, thank you all so much. I'm really looking forward to learning more. Folks, today we are going to start by we're going to talk about, like we always do, what we're drinking. But when we get into it, I'm gonna make sure that you understand why we have cocktails and distilled spirits. Am I saying, is it distilled spirits?
Yes.
Is that right? Obviously, I'm not a person that partakes in the distilled spirits that often. Gin has just recently come into my life. My husband is big into gin currently. So
The day's still young.
there you go. So today's going to be much of a learning experience. But it all makes sense why I am sitting here with these wonderful folks very, very shortly. I will just remind you all that during our recent episode on blending beers and mixing cocktails, Kevin was with us, and I've heard so much positive response on that show that that's definitely one of the reasons that we are here today. So thank you, Kevin, for that. Everybody that I've spoken to about that episode is loving it.
Well, thank you guys for having us and coming here, and hopefully we can give a little more knowledge on the distillery side of the house, and maybe later on, if you want to come down, we'll talk cocktails and blending.
That sounds fabulous. Yeah, I got to tell you that my mom was very excited after listening to that. My mom is definitely my biggest fan, as I believe she should be, right? And she's like, "Oh my goodness, there are so many beers in my house that I just didn't really like them. I feel like I have hope now." so she's going to be doing some of her own craft beer cocktail mixing at home, which is really fun for me because that's not my mom. So it's awesome. Okay, let's just jump right in. Where do you want me to start? There's all these tiny little glasses. There's 6 of the tiny little glasses with a little bit of liquor in each of them. Yeah.
We have our tasting flight. of all of our spirits. So you get about a 1/4 ounce pour of each of our spirits. We have our white whiskey, which is a 100 proof spirit, our bourbon, our sour mash bourbon, 86 proof there. We have our vodka, which is a French wheat vodka, our gin, that is a very botanical, more New Western style dry gin. We have our white rum, made from Caribbean molasses, and then our barrel-aged rum, which is aged in our bourbon barrels.
Okay. There was an order. Kevin put them down in a specific order. I don't know this order.
I started with my favorite, which is the white whiskey, but why don't you give a sip on the white whiskey?
Is that this one?
It is.
Okay.
It's the only one that comes with instructions.
Okay.
It's going to require 2 sips.
Okay.
The first one, just take the first one and let it sort of percolate a little bit. I'll let Ashley speak on like the exact order of what has to happen.
Yeah, so you're going to take a small sip. Just kind of get your tongue wet. Roll your tongue around the inside of your mouth. That will feel a bit prickly. Like I said, it's a 100 proof spirit. It's not one of our lighter hitters. It is extracting all the water from the tissues of your mouth. So that's that prickliness. Once that prickliness starts to subside, you look scared. Don't be scared.
It looks slightly scared. Yeah.
It's all downhill from here, I promise.
All right.
So once that prickliness subsides in your mouth, you can take your second sip.
Okay.
That's when you're going to get the flavors of the spirit. The first sip, you won't get much of that. So with your second sip, you will get sweetness. That comes from the corn. You'll get a pepperiness in the throat. That comes from our rye. And then you will have a nice warm sensation, maybe to the toes.
To the toes. One thing that I've noticed, though, is like even though it's a very clear liquid, it stays on the side of the glass, much like beer does with the lacing.
Well, the legs.
Yeah, the legs.
And
the
it's
legs
because
and the
of the
lacing.
proof. What you're seeing on the side of the glass are the legs of the glass, and a little bit has to do with the proof of the spirit and the cleanliness of the spirit. We do very, very conservative cuts coming off the still.
So what does that mean, a conservative cut?
We cut out a lot of the nasties and fusel oils towards the end, and only collect for the main body of the spirit very, very clean alcohol.
So the proof is because it's 100 proof. So
Yep.
will some of the other ones have less
Yes.
of the legs?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna try. So there's this. Sometimes I have to talk myself into trying a new beverage. I always will, but I feel like this might hurt a little bit.
Be brave.
I once tried a pepper beer. Like, it was very peppery, and it took me about this much time, and I'm used to beer. Right. Oh yeah, you totally get the like it's like a hot prickliness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can feel it pulling all the water.
Yep. Oh yeah, you do get the sweetness like on your tongue. It's still hot. But
100 proof.
Yeah. But yeah, it definitely. So something that I have done, I've gone to places that have beers and spirits, and so my husband will want to try one of the things, and I'll take a sip. And normally it's just the sip, and so it's really interesting, like how it can change on the second sip.
Oh, yeah.
With beer, gozas are the same way because it's like a salt water one, and if you've been drinking other things, your mouth is like, "What the heck did you just do to me?" So there's like a 3-sip rule with goza. So I will at least take away from this that I need to try more than just one sip.
Yeah, first sip is really, really small. Your first sip was actually twice as big as it should have been.
Really? I thought I got like nothing in there.
You just want
a
your
little
tongue
bit.
wet. Yep.
Wow.
And usually we have people wait 45 seconds to almost a minute before they take their second sip.
Okay.
Again, you're extracting the moisture from the tissues of the skin.
Yeah, I can still
opening
feel it
things
happening.
up. It's a prickliness, but on the second sip, it just fully opens up. And as Ashley said, the sweetness of the corn and the pepperiness of the rye really comes through, because that white whiskey is the base for our bourbon and our gins.
Oh, okay.
So it's the same spirit. And we bottled it in the very beginning because our focus is on a bourbon. And I was impatient to have to wait for the aging. And we wanted to make sure that our recipe, where this whole thing's self-taught,
Right.
was going in the direction that we wanted to go in. So we kept many, many different run samples, and we would go back and forth comparing them. Having customers come in to the distillery and, offering them a sample and a tasting and things like that, I was shocked at the amount of people that they wanted to be able to buy this product. So at that point, we decided, well, let's bottle it. And, it is not our biggest seller, but I will say it has our biggest cult following.
Really?
People drive 2.5 hours one way to come in and buy several bottles at a time. Then we don't see them for a while, then they come back.
Well, if they're going to drive 2.5 hours one way.
Yeah, they're not going to buy just one bottle.
Right, they're like, all right, we got to stock up because we can't come back.
It makes the most awesome Bloody Mary you'll ever have in your life.
Oh, I am a really big Bloody Mary fan. Also, Bloody Maria.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little tequila in there.
Yep.
Sorry. Okay, and so is it just corn and rye?
And malted barley.
And malted barley.
Our grain bill for our bourbon mash, which is, again, white whiskey, bourbon, gin, it's 58% corn, 37% rye, and 5% malted barley. And we do a very old style of cook and fermentation that is referred to as hot and dirty. We pitch our yeast at a very, very high temperature, and we are purposefully not super sanitary. Where in your world of beer, you have to be ultra sanitary. We want certain bugs to grow in our fermenters. We've gone over to cypress fermenters, which actually expand on the bacteria that we're able to store in the wood to increase our yield and amplify our flavor profiles.
I have some more follow-up questions, but I want to get through some more of these so that we can firmly land into the second round, because I feel like that'll open up our conversation a little bit. The next one has some color to it.
Yep. So that is our bourbon.
Okay.
And like Dave said, we do a sour mashing process, and we use the 58% corn, 37% rye, 5% malted barley. This is aged in new American charred oak barrels for 18 to 24 months.
So earlier, Amanda, you were telling me that that's a law, that has to happen in the new, is that right?
Yeah, in order for it to be classified as a bourbon, it has to be aged in a new white oak American barrel.
So
Charred,
yeah.
Charred. So that I was going to ask about that. So charred, like the outside, it looks beautiful. It's just like, a very pretty piece of wood. On the inside,
It's black.
it's black. So
Charcoal. The barrel is heated with a flame and brought to a fire. There's 4 different levels of char. Some cooperages will say they have 5. And the best way to think of the charring is you are making carbon.
Okay.
So the barrel acts a little bit like your Brita filter that you may have, CTO, color, taste, and odor.
Yep.
And as the spirit moves through the char layer based on seasonality, temperature and humidity changes, the carbon will absorb impurities.
So Brian is also here in the barn with us, and Brian brought a piece. Security detail, he says. He brought a piece of wood. Now, and that's from a
10-gallon barrel.
10-gallon, yeah, because that looked a lot smaller than the ones you were. So my next question about the barrel was, do they char it before or after they put it together? It looks like it's charred after.
Yep.
Correct. They assemble the barrel, they put on the bottom head typically, or they leave it as a hoop with no heads, depending on how that manufacturer chooses. ISC, which we get our 53-gallon barrels from, they're the world's largest barrel manufacturer. They have seven production facilities in the world, and their barrels are on a conveyor that go over a flame. They're flamed for 23 seconds for a level 3 char, and then it continues.
That's quick.
Yeah,
that's quick.
It's very intense flame, and then the heads are put on, and the barrel is done. We do business with the world's largest and one of the world's smallest cooperages, and they all do great barrels, and the barrels are totally different. I don't know how in-depth you want to get into barrels, but I can go down to there's a difference between Eastern Slope Oak and Western Slope Oak.
Wow, that is intriguing. Maybe another day we'll do a whole thing on barrels, beers in barrels, and distilled stuff in barrels. But right now, is it my imagination, or are the legs less thick on this one?
They would be less thick because that is at 86 proof versus 100.
Now, so this one, okay, I'm using my hands and I apologize. So the first one, the whiskey, right?
White whiskey.
That was used to make the bourbon.
Correct.
The whiskey comes out and it's 100 proof.
Well, when it comes out, it's 158 proof.
Holy macaroni. So then
We bottle it 100.
Okay, so I think that answers my question. So over time, does the proof go down? How does
We proof it down with purified water that we produce at the distillery, and we proof down at a certain percentage that we will not disclose per 24 hours.
Okay, awesome. And so this one you just proof down more?
We proof to barrel proof, which is another number that we won't disclose, and that is also with purified water.
Okay.
I will say it's above 100. And it's tucked away in the barrels. And this batch, I'm pretty sure, was like 26 months old.
Okay.
I'd have to look it up in the book.
Is there instructions on drinking this one?
Nope, this you can just sip.
Okay.
You're going to experience the sweetness of the corn
Okay.
that you had with the white is going to present more as a vanillin.
Okay.
The pepperiness you had in your throat will not be there, and that will show up as a dry cinnamon.
Okay.
And you may or may not get, but there's a cocoa finish that will be up in your sinuses, and that's from our yeast.
Really interesting. I like, while I was thinking about this and listening to Ashley's eyebrows were like, go for it. Jump in.
Yummy.
Have fun with that one.
Yeah.
It's really smooth.
Oh, yeah. Now, I've been talking about my husband liking gin, but he has started doing some bourbons as well, I believe. Are whiskeys sometimes a brown too?
Yes.
Okay.
All bourbons are whiskeys, not all whiskeys are bourbons.
Right. I've heard that. I never can keep it straight, but I've heard that, so it makes sense to me.
It's a brown spirit category.
Okay. So he's been drinking this, and the only way that I can, not this as in yours, this is in bourbon, the only way I can ever do is by adding more water and a lot of ice cubes. But this one, I could just add an ice cube to and sip on it, not drown it.
Right.
That's normally what I'm doing. So what I mean by that is it is very smooth.
We don't have what is known as the bourbon bite. All of our spirits are really ultra smooth, and a lot of that has to do with our proofing protocols and the way we do cuts coming off the still and the way we do our fermentations.
Yeah, no, that we're big into Game of Thrones right now.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, we just caught up-ish. We're not quite 100%, but we're in the right season. And so a lot of bourbon has been had watching Game of Thrones.
So season 3 was in full bottle at that point in time during the red wedding?
Oh, yeah, that was an intense wedding. I'm glad mine was not like that. But that is an eye-opening experience to me.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Water. All right.
So one of my favorite things that I've been doing recently at home, well, back on the beer side of the house, is I know we talked about blending cocktails. What I have been doing recently is using the white whiskey as the base spirit to mix with beer. It's actually a pretty spirit forward, but it actually allows you to keep the characteristics of the beer flavor and also taste the spirit. So that and gin have been my two favorite things to play with this summer.
So, time out. What does it do to... So, like, what do you put the whiskey in? Maybe we've already talked about this.
A little
There's
bit.
A lot happening that day.
White whiskey, last night I did one of the Angels with Filthy Souls, not to plug anybody, but with...
Did you do the extra dirty ones or whatever? Or,
not the extra dirty.
No.
Just the regular...
or extra filthy, I think.
Extra
right?
filthy, yeah. We're lucky enough to get a couple cans, of that. And I was doing the white whiskey just straight with the stout. And then if my wife liked it a little bit, we were actually doing a little bit of just straight simple syrup on the top.
Wow.
So happy to make a few for you another time.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. I drank some water, and now I'm ready for number 3.
Yep, so now we're back to a clear spirit. This is our vodka. It is a French wheat vodka. We find it very important to work with our stills. So we don't do a lot of cleaning of our stills. As Dave said, we kind of work with the different dirty aspects of distilling. So our stills get a little bit dirty, we don't necessarily clean them every single time. Our vodka, when it goes into the spirit still, so for its final run of distillation, goes in the day after we do a bourbon run. So it works with the patina inside of the still that has been built up, and the patina is more porous, so it takes on some of the esters and other essences from the bourbon, and it gets reemulsified in with the vodka as it comes out.
Now, I've had a lot of vodka in my day. I was a college girl at one point.
Weren't we all?
I don't think all of us were.
Oh, that's too bad.
But, yeah. This does not bring back horrible memories. You can bring that smell up in your mind,
yeah.
right?
It's called acetone.
Yeah. So it has like almost a sweet, like grainy nose to it.
Yeah.
And it's silky smooth. I mean, Amanda's husband, David Jr., calls it gulpable vodka.
Gulpable
vodka.
Yeah.
So in the beer world, the word you'd be looking for is crushable.
Crushable.
Yes,
So
this
yes.
is a crushable vodka. Just for you, marketing wise, if you want to hit those craft beer people.
Probably a little better.
Drink responsibly.
Yes. Honestly, I would say that maybe an eighth of an ounce, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. If I'm gonna gulp this eighth of an ounce right here. Oh yeah. There's almost like a vanilla-ness to it. I don't know if that
Yep.
makes sense, but yeah. We should have done this a long time ago, guys. Like this is...
It's really good vodka.
It really is. This would have made my college days so much better.
Yeah, I know.
Probably a lot more expensive, though, because that 5 o'clock vodka, it's pretty cheap by the
It
day.
is.
Oh, yeah.
It is.
But you pay for it in other ways.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no.
There's
Like,
actually...
I haven't had a lot of vodka in recent days just because, you tend to steer away from things. That is good. I can see what your husband's talking about. Like,
Yeah.
it's good.
The origin story is actually really interesting.
Okay, let's do it. You know how I like origin
I
stories.
know you do. That's why I was going to let Dave speak on the origin
Go
stories.
for
It's
it.
his...
All right. Well, the vodka wasn't coming out very well. And the biggest thing in running a distillery is you get into the point of the MAQ'd maximum allowable quantities. And we were getting a buildup of vodka that we were never going to bottle or sell. Needed to be destroyed. You destroy it by denaturing it.
Can you tell me what that means?
Well, you make it non-potable, and there's
Okay.
several ways you can do that. Biggest thing is you have to have it witnessed by an unrelated third party. They have to sign an affidavit under the terms of perjury of the federal government that what they witnessed was true, and you put that in your logbooks so when you go through your audits that you can say this product was destroyed, and this is why we didn't pay any tax money on it, and that's where the alcohol went. We were running out of tank space, and we needed to get rid of some vodka.
When you say tank space, do you
Physical
like
tanks.
silver,
Yeah,
like stainless
steel tanks.
Okay.
So we were going to denature it and say, put the vodka on the shelf, and let's go back making bourbon because we need to. Had it all scheduled. Person was supposed to show up. They didn't show up. And I said, well, okay, what am I going to do now? I still need tank space. So we threw it in the still to reduce it down. Just threw it in, proofed it down, cranked the still up on high, and sort of just monitored it, didn't watch it. And halfway through it, I just stuck my finger under the parrot, tasted it, and it was, oh my God, good.
A parrot?
Yeah, that's where the spirit comes out of the condenser.
Okay.
They're typically called the parrot.
See, there's all kinds of new terms, and
Yeah.
so I just have to keep up with you.
Yeah, no, not a problem. And so I slowed the still down, completed the run, and had, I think it was like 28 proof gallons of really good tasting vodka.
Yeah.
The next day, threw some in the still, and we keep copious notes on everything we do.
You're better than I am.
And ran the vodka again, and it tastes like crap. So went back through, did another run, didn't taste very good. And to make a long story rather shorter, not short, but shorter, we found out that the final distillation of the vodka is made quite nicely by proofing it down, doing it after we do a certain amount of spirit runs with our bourbon, as Ashley mentioned, and then do our final distillation for our vodka. And it just picks up the patina of the still and makes silk in a glass.
Yeah, that's a really good descriptor of it, because it was very, very silky and smooth and very shockingly sweet. And, not shockingly sweet, like it was overly sweet, but like did not expect that.
It's a vodka that you can drink with an ice cube or a twist and call it a martini.
Yeah, it was really good. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, so now
I like that story. But I could never recreate that, because when I cook or make beer, I'm horrible at note taking. It's like a little of this, a little of that. And so thank you for taking great notes, because that was amazing. Okay, ready now, for reals.
For reals.
Now it's time for gin.
Yeah.
Gin, okay.
Yeah, so you said your husband's been into gins lately?
Yeah, gins and tonics.
More botanical gins or the London Dries?
He likes one that is called New Amsterdam. If you know what that is, then that is the kind he likes.
Okay.
So is that more botanical or piney or citrusy?
I think it's a little bit more piney.
Okay.
Ours is definitely much more botanical and citrusy and floral than that.
Okay.
Actually, more so than most of the gins on the market right now.
All right. So botanical is going to be some of those flowery type flavors, is that right?
Yes.
And the juniper is the piney ones, right? And then the citrus is citrus.
Yeah. Okay. In our gin, Dave did a lot of research to try to avoid that overpowering juniper Christmas tree mouth explosion that a lot of gin drinkers or non-gin drinkers try to avoid. Yeah. That's why the majority of people don't like gins, I feel. So Dave didn't like gin, and he's like, I'm going to create a gin I like, so let's try to tone that down. He found a juniper berry that was a little more mild. It's a Croatian juniper, and then we have a huge amount of jasmine. So that's a lot of the floral that you're getting.
I can smell. Yeah, I was like, I don't know what it is, but there's a floweriness to it.
And it's floral, but not perfumey.
No.
Yeah,
it's definitely more like walking outside and getting a whiff of like springtime flowers instead of like your great Aunt Helen's flower spray. And
I call it after a spring rain.
Yeah. So tons of jasmine in that. Orange zest, orange peel. We have some orris root, angelica root, and coriander.
Yeah, that's good. I could see how, if you said you were making beer cocktails with this, I could see that.
One of my favorites with our gin, or just gin in general, is if you take like a very, let's say hop forward IPA, mix it with the gin, a little bit of lemon, like a little bit of citrus to open it up, and then if you want to do simple syrup, which the world's most simple recipe, equal parts sugar and water.
Yeah.
Just a little, to your liking, and it's pretty much one of my favorite drinks, especially like warmer weather.
Yeah, I could really just see like a very simple homemade lemonade with that in it.
Oh,
Done.
yeah. Yep.
Right?
Dangerous.
Yeah.
So
that's a really...
It's really good with grapefruit peel.
A little bit more on the bitter end that brings it out, but the sweetness really comes through. So like Dave said earlier, we use our white whiskey base as our gin base. So we take that and we add our botanicals to it. So that pepperiness kind of comes through.
Yeah, it's kind of sitting there.
Yeah.
Yeah, as it sits, I can get the peppery flavor to it.
A lot of gins, they actually put black pepper in them.
Yeah.
And we don't have to do that.
Wow. Okay, two more.
So now we're onto our rums.
So they're both rums.
Yep, so one's our barreled rum and one is our white rum.
Okay.
The first that we'll start with is our white rum, which is a traditional Caribbean-style rum. It's very buttery.
Oh, it smells buttery. Like
and almost butterscotch.
Almost.
Yep,
Yeah.
So, I mean, the nose is a bit deceiving. It does not taste like butterscotch. Yeah, so it's buttery. It's very pungent. It's a very bold rum.
It's an interesting, so I took a sip and I can get some of those like sweeter flavors in the front, and then there's a very interesting back flavor. I don't know what it is. I can't quite put my finger on it. I don't know. I'm not going to be able to. But there's like definitely something that hits you in the back end on that one.
So for this, it's a great mixer for all those. You think about the tiki cocktails that are. I mean, they kind of went to sleep for a little while, but they're back in force now.
Oh yeah, tiki, rum
and grog.
Yep,
yeah,
rum and grog.
Yep. Yeah, it's nice in the winter to go there.
Oh yeah,
Because it makes you feel like, oh wait, we
you wanna-
live in Maine in the winter.
If you want to make something to make you feel warm in the winter, any rum. I like our rums together, the barrel aged and the white or the non-barrel aged rum. Just really simple: hot water, lemon, maybe a little simple syrup, and you get a little like traditional grog or a hot toddy type drink.
Yeah, I've kind of been big into the hot toddies.
Oh,
Yeah.
me too.
It's like a little bit. Like,
Too
I
much?
have a cold. I should have a hot toddy.
yeah.
I will say my house is undergoing construction right now, which might be okay for my love of hot toddies because we can have a break.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was good. And this is not as dark as the other one that was
Oh,
in
no.
there. So
I just want to bring you
Okay,
back to the
bring
white
it
just
back
for a
to the white.
second. You were trying to. I was actually giving you some time to see if you could come up with the flavor.
I couldn't.
That flavor that you're experiencing is actually rum. Most rums that are commercially sold are quite sweet on the palate.
Yep.
And that sweetness covers the true rum flavor of the spirit, my belief. So by not producing an overly sweet rum, and we use a dunder pit, which is a story for a totally different day.
Google it.
Google it, and when it comes to the sheep's head, we didn't use a sheep's head.
Okay.
But
Okay. We're gonna put that one in the show notes, folks.
it's
Google
kind
it.
of
No sheep's head involved.
It's kind of sour mash for whiskey, but with rum.
Okay.
Sour mash is always fresh. For rum, it's called dunder, and our dunder pit is over 3 years old, and it's infected with bacteria and a fungus
In a good way.
in a good way, and that allows us to create a huge amount of esterification in our fermentations, and it's what gives us the rum that we have. So it's a non-sweet rum. It's a true Caribbean rum.
So can I ask you a question?
How did you think I was going to come up with the flavor of rum to be rum? Like you said, you were waiting.
No, I was waiting for you to be able to describe it, and you couldn't.
Okay.
And you couldn't.
I couldn't.
Right.
No.
And again, it's because a lot of people have. I have a home in the Caribbean, and I've consumed a little bit of rum, and the traditional rums that are never exported off the island taste a lot like our rum.
Yeah, I've actually been to the Caribbean a couple of times, and we find that the local beer goes really well with the local food and temperature outside. Mm-hmm. But in general,
Doesn't translate.
right, it's not fabulous. So we go and we hunt out rum, and we're in the tropical
Yep.
islands, and we've had a couple of tasty ones.
Yep.
And yeah, I can see that. It has been a little while since I've been down there, but I'll get back to you in March after I've been.
There you go.
Okay, so somebody was going to tell me why this rum is not, that's been barrel aged, is not as dark as
the bourbon.
the bourbon that
Yep.
was barrel aged.
So what I try to compare it to is, if you think about Scotch usually doesn't get as dark as bourbon, and that's usually because they're used barrels. So we got this guy, the stave here. We have a stave from a 10-gallon barrel. When the bourbon goes in, a lot of the color gets picked up from the tannins that have been converted from some other enzyme in the wood, in the toasting and the charring. So the bourbon gets a lot of the color. The rum, it's in there in the used bourbon barrel for 6 to 8 months. So not as long, and the bourbon has already picked up a lot of the color from the barrel itself.
So you buy a new barrel, you use it for bourbon,
Yep.
you let that sit there for
Couple of years
a couple years.
on the smaller barrels.
Yep, and then you take that out, and then you put rum in,
Correct.
and then when you take the rum out, and then are you done with the barrels at that
Nope.
point?
Nope. We produce a maple syrup in our rum barrels.
Really?
We produce a maple syrup in our bourbon barrels. We've done some single malts in our bourbon barrels, our rum barrels. I've done a tequila, which I'd have to call blue agave spirit, in bourbon barrels, rum barrels, and there's only so many hours in the day. And
so you just keep using them up, using them.
None of those products will be released for many years into the future.
Oh, really? Even like the syrup?
The syrup we have, yes.
Oh, okay.
But as far as we've done a rye whiskey, a single malt, an oat whiskey, a sorghum whiskey, and I like making all sorts of different things, but this is also a for-profit operation,
right.
And you have to focus on only a couple products. So as we expand, we're fortunate enough to be able to take some of the time out of our production and do some pet projects, per se. And
so it's basically like a brewer's like homebrew setup that they keep, like they kind of that's what they use to do all their little projects on. They keep a smaller system.
We do big runs.
Oh,
and
you do?
Just sort of say we'll do this today, and you just sort of squeeze it in, and then hold it aside and see what happens to it. The single malt that we've done, it's still very young, and people want me to bottle it right now.
I think your staff might too.
Yeah.
We've got some nodding heads and some whispering.
It's really good, but that's what you do with the used barrels. Is recycle them. My sweet spot on a barrel is on the product that comes out on the fourth filling. To me, it has the most sweetness and mildness with complexity, if that can be understood.
Yeah.
Do you want to go over the taste of that barreled rum and how it differs from the white?
Let me see if I can see any differences. You guys have kind of taken over my palate already. So at this point, the legs are much thinner.
Yeah. So with the white rum, they would have had longer legs. They're more
Yep.
buttery. They stick to the glass a bit more. But the butteriness gets absorbed by the barrel. Mm-hmm. So although our white rum is a very dry rum, the barreled comes out much more dry, almost dry to like a cognac-style spirit.
Yeah, it's good. I don't think I could... I think I would need to have them both side by side to be able to, like, compare and contrast. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely tasty. This has definitely been an eye-opening experience. When Kevin was like, do you want to do a flight or a tasting or whatever, however you called it, I was like, yeah.
The fear was real.
Yeah, it was a real fear.
You came through like a trooper, though.
Thank you. The fear's not over, though.
The cocktail's still coming.
Yeah, the cocktail's here. And Ashley asked me if I had any egg allergies. Which, not gonna lie,
I could see the fear in your face.
No? Why does that matter? Are you giving me a deviled egg? Like, what's the point?
Hey, you never know here.
Okay, so, yes, thank you very much. That was very enlightening. I'm very, very excited to actually experience more distilled things. When I go on trips, the whole way, the reason that my husband and I got into beer way back when was that we would go to breweries together and we'd learn about the brewery and never really went to distilleries. There's one that's like in the Old Port, and we had like a date night this summer, and so we went there, and they were a little bit more prickly on my tongue. So it was not the best of experiences in regards to that. There was like, I think moonshine was a big part of what they had there. But this actually, I can totally see on the next trip that we go on that I want to like go to a distillery.
Yeah, there are good spirits out there. You got to take a little care and time in what you're making, and research is. You guys are very much life-changing, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
We haven't even gotten into round 2 yet, so tell me about this, and then we're going to jump right into round 2, and I will drink this and report back as needed.
Okay, sounds good. So I did a take on a whiskey sour, or usually with egg whites and bitters. They refer to them as a Boston sour, and that's usually made with rye whiskey. But our whiskey, being high rye, actually makes a great Boston sour. So it has our bourbon, some lemon juice, a little bit of fresh grapefruit juice, some simple syrup, and egg whites, froth. That's what's making that nice divide there. And
yeah, it's held up really well.
Yeah. It's been sitting here and it still looks quite beautiful, if I
It is very gorgeous.
can say
You did a
so.
great job.
And then it has some Luxardo cherry in it, zest of an orange, and some Fee Brothers peach bitters. So it's got all kinds of different flavors going on. But from what you had said with your style beers, I thought, this has got a little bit of the creaminess, some of the citrus, the bitter.
Yeah, so Kevin said, what do you want to drink? And handed me a menu, and I basically, handed it back to him. I was like, I don't know. And so he asked me what I like to drink, and I knew I didn't have much to go off on the distilled side of things. So I was like, so what I do when I try to have somebody learn about beers, I'm like, well, what flavors do you like? So if you like a Midori sour, I'm going to send you in one direction. If you like a white wine, I'm going to send you in another direction. So I like beer. So I was like, can I tell you what beers I like? And this is what you came up out of: a citrusy IPA, a sour, and a stout. So, all right. Oh, it smells good. It definitely has that citrusy smell right off.
Yeah, when you zest that orange right over it, you get a lot of expression of the orange oils, and that just makes or breaks cocktails.
Oh, that is good. Yeah, I'm not scared of egg whites anymore. Yeah, it's the egg whites really just add a softness to it, and like you said, very creamy, very citrusy. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it brings it all together. Yeah. It's very balancing.
Yeah.
I mean, in Prohibition times, they would use egg whites to kind of cut that bite of some of the harsher spirits that were being produced illegally, and it kind of carried through in some of the more traditional cocktails. I mean, even if you go somewhere and you get a margarita and they use the gun sour mix, gross, but a lot of times that has egg whites in it because that's how sours were made. They were citrus, a sweetener, and egg whites.
Huh. Yeah, no, it's good. Scary to think about, but really good.
Yeah.
And this whole Great Beer Adventure thing has been literally that. It has been an amazing venture that I keep learning about new things. I hope that all of my listeners out there are willing to go out and try some new things. So your homework assignment for this weekend is definitely to go out and find your local distillery and give them a try, because as a beer lover, I am absolutely loving this. Speaking of being as a beer lover, let's talk about how beer and distilling are similar, and then I'm sure they're very different as well. We've already mentioned the sanitation thing, which unless you're doing a farmhouse or an open fermentation where you want some of those funky things coming in, you're right. Very, very sanitary, and otherwise it could really, really mess up your entire system.
And probably lose your customer base.
Probably. So when we were talking prior, you were asking me what my thoughts were about how beer and spirits are the same. One of the things that really, for me, is the reason that I love being in Maine, specifically in Portland, is that there's this community craft beer passionate vibe where there's so much collaboration around beer and restaurants and beer and art and beer and music and beer and cocktails and all of these different places where it's just this passion, and it's a passion project. A lot of what it is. Yes, you still have to make a profit, but I don't think that you're gonna necessarily become a millionaire because you started a brewery, or my guess is probably not a distillery either, but so there's a lot of passion involved. That's why I think that they're the same. Is that true?
Yes. The passion in the whole craft anything. You go to a craft fair and you see the person that knitted or made a quilt, they have passion in what they do. For me, it goes back to the beginning of our American society, that is how things were done. For us at Wiggly Bridge, the way I was brought up in business was to overthink things a little bit and to make sure that everybody was getting the wow factor. When they have an experience with you or purchase something with you or do business with you, that their expectations should always be exceeded. And I have a mentor in my life that I've had for many, many years, and we have many family businesses, and he always used to joke to me, so, you do really great and this and that, and you got a great family, but you don't make anything. And he comes from the manufacturing end of things. And that always stuck in my craw. And when the distillery project came about, it was my chance for the first time in my life to actually make something, versus being service added or value added in the other businesses that we operate. So, being a self-starter and extremely frugal, it wasn't write a check, buy a still, write a check, hire a distiller, write a check, buy a building, which we could have done. It was, how do we build stills?
Right.
That was 2 years of research. How do you make spirits? Mm-hmm. That was 2.5 years of research, along with the 2 years of research for the still. And in an industry where the average craft distillery is started in the neighborhood of $250,000 to $400,000 out of the gate, we opened up our door on $22,000.
Wow.
And it's because we produced our own still. We were very frugal in the way we did things, and we were very, very small.
Yeah.
And that's a way a lot of craft brewers also start, not so much on the distilling side. It's funny, whenever we would enter a tasting competition, the summation of the judges on the judging notes were primarily, don't change a thing, bigger barrels, more time. So it was the highest form of flattery that could have been given to us to hear that from professionals in the industry that are tasting our product, that we were pretty close to being where we needed to be. And now that we're filling bigger barrels and aging longer time, we will see the results of that in 2 or 3 years. As far as craft distilling, craft brewing, growth-wise, they're almost identical.
Yeah.
If you lay the distilling growth curve over the previous 17 years of the craft beer growth curve, they're identical.
Wow.
Which also tells us in another 18 months there's going to be an attrition starting in the craft distilling, the way there was an attrition in craft brewing, which is good and not good for the industry. I make beer every day. I just would never bottle it, and no one would want to drink it because it wouldn't taste very good. We make a distiller's beer. Okay, it's made from grains. We use yeast. We use water. We use a sour mash, which I don't think beers use.
Not in general.
I'm not a beer guy, so if I'm naive or misspeak on the beer, let me have a disclosure. It's what I know of beer, which you could put in a thimble.
Or a 7-ounce bottle.
Or a 7-ounce bottle, yeah. Hey, you've been to the Caribbean. We do our cooks. We do a step-down mash with no boil-off. Typical beer production is a step-up mash infusion with a final boil-off, to the best of my knowledge. And it does different things to the grains. Mm-hmm. It releases different sugars.
Yeah.
Because when you're cooking your grains, you can take that starch and make it a different type of sugar, and some sugars aren't fermentable.
Yeah, so there's a gentleman that I was talking to, and he was telling me he was going into that, and he was like, different temperatures release different sugars in the malted barley.
Yep, and it's it shows up in making spirits. Like our bourbon, again, we're corn, rye, and malted barley, and we do a step down. So when we start our kettle, we put our volume of water in it and bring it up to a full boil.
So I went down earlier, and the copper pieces are the stills.
Yep.
The kettle, is it an open top?
Nope, that was a stainless steel
Okay.
tank.
Like right down at the bottom of
Yep.
the stairs?
Yep.
So that's a similar piece of equipment.
Yes. Yep. That actually came from a cheese factory.
Yeah, a lot of breweries actually get their stuff from dairy places.
Yep.
Like if they're starting up and making their own. Yeah, I think there's a lot of ingenuity as well.
Or being frugal.
That might be the main in us.
Yeah.
My dad always used to say that he could build anything and he could do it cheaper himself. I think Bob Marley actually had a little thing around about building the porch out back, that he went down to like some local place and they said that they could do it for $1,000. He did it for $999. Don't walk on that corner and be careful of that railing. But he did it and he saved $1.
Yeah.
That's pretty main.
The 275 gallons still, we saved $250,000 building it.
That's a big
Little chunk.
Bob Marley would appreciate that.
So the way I've always put that is there's a whole lot of hooch we don't have to sell to be profitable.
Yeah, there you go.
But anyways, getting back to the similarities between distilling and crafting beer. So we'll bring the water to a boil where they will, based on my knowledge, immerse their grains at a much lower temperature and bring it up. I'm pretty lazy, and I hate getting inside the kettle to give it a good scrub down. So we turn the steam injector on, steam the kettle for about 5 minutes in the morning to kill any bacteria that may have grown overnight. And then we bring the water to a boil, 212 degrees, for about 10 minutes prior to putting the grains in. And that is primarily to blow off the chlorine and chloramines that are in our town water, which is amongst the best waters you can, I think, make spirits out of because it's ultra soft.
So is it different than the Portland water? I don't know where the water districting goes.
York is really fortunate that our water department does a fantastic job monitoring things, but our reservoir is a spring-fed surface water runoff reservoir, so we're getting the best of both worlds. In a previous life, I actually owned a water purification company, and we had an EPA-certified testing laboratory, and I know a little bit about water. And York's water is 26 parts per million of total dissolved solids with 1/16 of a grain of hardness, which is probably
Just a little bit
better
of water,
than
right?
any bottled water you could buy, and we have it coming out of the tap. This is not a diss to anybody, but I cannot understand why people would buy bottled water if they're on our water supply. It's just really good.
And if anybody's ever gone down to Florida, you can tell.
Yeah. This is what hard water tastes like.
Exactly.
With a little bit of swamp taste.
And a couple alligator tails in there.
But, so that's based on what I can summarize is the big difference between distilling and brewing. Their aging, their boiled product at the end to sanitize it in a bright tank, I think it's called.
I will say most do.
Okay.
Barreled Souls up in Saco, they are primarily, I think they just got a couple bright tanks to do a couple things with, but they're pretty much all
barrel aged.
Yep. Well, barrel fermenting.
Barrel fermenting. Oh,
yeah.
Awesome.
Not just barrel aging.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, a lot of breweries will do barrel aging, and they've got like a whole program around it. And I know that Rising Tide just opened up. You were talking earlier about needing to have more room for your barrels, and they just opened up a big, huge facility for all of theirs.
Well, just in case you haven't heard, we have a new brewer in town in Kittery, Woodland Farms. Patrick Rowan, who was on your show earlier with us, he actually took one of our barrels and is fermenting something currently.
Yeah.
So that should be out in March or April.
Cool, yeah. So like, there's definitely some aging, and then fermenting. The fermenting, I actually heard that the barrel shape actually is really good for the beer, and it kind of makes things, I don't know, it was on a previous episode if you want to go listen to it. There was something about atmospheric pressure and like the shape.
You get convection in a roll
Yeah.
as the temperatures change in the barrel. I mean, that comes to the seasonality. I'm going on the distilling side. The atmosphere of the barrel, when you go into a hot cycle, the barrel will actually pressurize and force the spirit into the stave of the wood and dissolve a mild layer of the caramelized sugars that happen during the toasting. Then on a cold cycle, the barrel will actually go into a vacuum, and it will suck all the spirit out of the stave, and it's not fun trying to get a bung out of a vacuumed barrel. They just don't want to come out. And so the seasonality of the cycles, or the seasons, winter, spring, summer, fall, is what will change the convection and the rolling of the spirit. Now, when we first started, we cycle heated our barrel room. We go from 97 degrees for about 3 weeks to ambient temperature for 3 to 5 weeks, and then back to hot, back to cold. And our very, very first bourbon that we bottled, we received a bronze medal at a tasting competition, and we beat out a lot of 2- and 3-year bourbons, and this was 9 months old. And we called it a baby bourbon. And it's all grown up now.
Yeah. I like that. I like that kind of thing a lot. So, back to the gin and beer and everything together thing. I have seen that some gins sometimes have like hops added into it. Is that anything that you've considered trying, or no,
that's
and why?
Kind of why I'm not a huge beer drinker, is I don't enjoy hops. There's a lot of craft things being done in craft brewing and craft distilling. I am a little bit older than most people that get into this industry. I tend to be much more traditionally focused than a lot of folk, and I just sort of want to do the good old school stuff really well, and leave a lot of the fooling around and innovation to people that are more turned on to that. I mean, there's barrels that we're filling right now that I will, in my lifetime, not see emptied.
Really?
So, it just sort of gives you a little bit of perspective into how much do you want to do. I was brought up with a saying, don't outswim your stroke in life. And, we want to focus on doing a couple things really well versus a lot of things okay.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about the fact that I was in teaching, and in teaching there's a big conversation around whether you should go a mile wide and an inch deep, or an inch wide and a mile deep.
I firmly believe in do what you do and do it well. And in business, on the success-failure side of it, you were more likely to succeed if you can avoid business distractions, because so many things will pull at your apron strings to get you to change direction, and it might be really fun to do something, but in the long term, it's making you go backwards.
Oh, you're preaching to the choir right here. There's definitely, just recently, there's been a lot of things where I have to question, like, does it make sense? Like, how amazing would it be if you could go and have, like, a meetup where it was, like, amazing beverages and pedicures, right? Wouldn't that be, like, the best meetup ever, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's all I want.
Almost as good as beer yoga.
Right,
yes.
But like beer pedicures, wouldn't that be fabulous? And I was like, for about 5 minutes, I was like, I'm going to make that happen. And then I was like, oh, but really, does that help in the long run? But that would be so much fun. That's going in the, I need to do that someday, but not even remotely close to today.
So what were you said you were a teacher? What subjects were you?
Math? Yeah, I'm a numbers nerd.
Numbers nerd? So I was going to give you a little history on distillation. And
you can go for it.
So as it's almost President's Day, who do you think was the most famous American president as a distiller?
I know. The other Amanda knows. I don't know. I know Obama liked beer.
George Washington was actually a distiller of rye whiskey.
Really?
5 years after his presidency, he did 11,000 gallons in, I think, 5 years after he came out.
Wow.
Sold it for 50 cents a gallon, so it was big numbers back then.
Yeah. I wonder if Obama will start his own brewery with his, wasn't it his, didn't he have, an on-staff?
Yeah. There was someone who was making creations.
Yeah. Wow.
So figured I'd give you the President's Day trivia here while we were here. There's some really interesting lore, too, in terms of the background of how bourbon was actually barreled in charred barrels rather than new barrels. And it goes back to saying that the lore was that originally, was it Elijah? I'm trying to remember
It wasn't bourbon at that point. It was
yes.
whiskey.
Whiskey. I'll let you tell the story, Dave. You seem to know it better. No. That there was a fire, and rather than be an upfront business person, he decided to barrel it anyway and send it downriver. And once it reached New Orleans, down the Mississippi, it actually was opened up, and everyone really liked it. I don't know if I told that story the way you've heard it, but I'll let you add any details you like.
There are probably 6 different versions that run the gamut on how charred barrels came about. I will leave that to the historians to argue about, because they are totally different from one to the next. And it goes from salt fish in barrels trying to burn out the flavor, to olive oil being put in clay pots and them not working well, and the ships converted over to an oak barrel, and they had to burn out the oils and the salts in order to put the whiskeys in. And the Elijah Craig story, I heard that at the Elijah Craig Distillery tour. So, I just know that when you burn a barrel inside, it makes really good hooch. And that's good enough for me.
One thing that I did want to come back to, we probably need to move on to our 3rd and 4th rounds, but before we do, one thing I wanted to come back to is that one thing that I'm finding really interesting between all beverages that I'm learning about is terroir is a big thing. And you were talking about earlier how when you were describing the vacuum and the expansion of a barrel, it really sounded like it was breathing.
Yes.
And you also talked about earlier when we were downstairs that it was permeable. And so it takes on the flavors of the soil.
Of the surrounding area, yep.
Which, can you go into that more?
I'm a neophyte on the subject, but I probably know enough to carry on a cocktail conversation about it.
How about a beer one?
Yeah, sure. Just don't judge me at the end of the day.
I won't.
Yes, the barrels are permeable. They breathe. They create oxidation of the spirit. And the outside atmosphere of the barrel is extremely important. And that's one of the reasons why we pulled the trigger on this building that I've been in love with for 35 years of my lifetime. I
Kevin
turned
was
down
telling me it
buying
used
this
to
in
be
1983.
Really?
And I passed on it. And I had to add a couple zeros to the check when I bought it a couple years ago. But needless to say, we dug out the root cellars of the barn to get headroom. And the barn is built on a dry stack fieldstone foundation, and then it's backfilled with soil to hold it. When we dug out the foundation, we put in cement retaining walls on the bottom stacks to keep them from kicking out. And when it rains, it is definitely earthy down there.
Just as a lightly describe it.
Yeah. No, it's earthy. And that is influencing our barrels. And it gives a more subtle, earthy tone to the spirit. And that all came from a woman who is one of the most renowned noses in the world. A nose is somebody that goes around tasting spirits and blending spirits for companies, and she's from Germany.
Really?
And she had a client in, I believe it was either Germany or Austria, one or the other. And they were running out of space, and he was going to build a building, and the building was designed to have dirt floors with a center cement runway to run the equipment down, forklift and things like that, and the earthiness would come out of the soil. And they're talking and talking and talking, and she looked up at the backyard, and it sort of abutted what was the beginning of mountains, and she saw a steel gate. And she was talking to him about the steel gate and this and that and everything else. And long story short, it was a cave, and they put a gate up to keep people out because they were having some problems. And she said, "Can we go in there?" And she went in there with him. And that's where all his barrels are aging now, is in this cave. And she was really turned on because there's bats in the cave. And the bat guana, a word, sort of like that, is in the air, gets on the barrels. And I guess 2 years ago they produced the world's greatest brandy. Wow. And a lot of it comes from the environment.
Yeah. It's like those coffee beans that are better when the cat eats them, and then...
Oh, yeah.
I've never tried them, but I hear that they're the best.
Aren't they like $500 an ounce or something ridiculous?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just so interesting because, definitely the water plays a part in the beer and in the spirits, but the terroir of the hops and the terroir of the grapes and the terroir of the barrel room, it's all really so interesting to me to see how all these amazing craft beverages, I feel like that would get a little bit wordy, great craft beverage adventure. I feel like this doesn't roll off the tongue quite as well, but I feel like they're all, minimally pulled together by the fact that location is a big part of it.
Location, and then also being to amplify what's your location. I mean, some people may take our water source as a negative.
Right.
Kentucky bourbons are world-renowned. They're fabulous in their own right, and they're made with a limestone water that is relatively to almost extremely hard. So they would probably say, "Oh, you're crazy making bourbon out. You can't make bourbon out of soft water." Well, what I do know is we can make a very, very smooth bourbon out of the way we make it versus a bourbon that has a bite, which may or may not be pleasurable for somebody. Somebody that comes to our tasting room and they're very familiar with Kentucky bourbons, they may not appreciate our bourbon. And for us, that's okay. I look at it on the business side of Coke, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, RC Cola, Tab when it was in existence. They're all colas. They all have a market share. They all have a segment of people that think that that's the best thing that they could consume. Otherwise, they wouldn't be buying it. So we are a niche company operating in a niche customer base of people that really appreciate and applaud what we do.
Yeah.
And all we're trying to do is satisfy those people. Now, as new people come in to our fold, it's exciting for us. But during the summertime, we see a lot of tourists, and everybody's got their opinion on what they like.
Yeah. Isn't there a saying about that?
Yeah, I'm not going to go there. This is a family show, right?
It is, actually, which is weird. People always tell me, you can't have a family show and be about beer. And I'm like, well, watch me. Okay. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. I'm very excited to be now part of this fold because it is very exciting. And
welcome to the dark side.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
But we have a lot of spirit.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun. Okay. Round 3. Quick answer from everyone. Normally we do, what is your first beer memory? But if you feel like going that route, fine. But in the spirit of spirits, let's find out your first, I'm going to go with the word craft your first craft spirit moment, because I've got some dark stories that we're not even going to hit about alcohol and 5 o'clock and yeah. So craft spirit. We're going to keep it a little classy today.
We're going to use the word craft loosely here. Okay. First spirit would obviously be, as a child, the parent decided that whiskey was a good idea for teething. But other than that, make a long story short, my mom passed away suddenly when I was a child, so my dad had to bring me on a second honeymoon, which happened to be with his new wife to Cancun. No one could really take, they were on their honeymoon. There was no one really to take care of me. So I got to learn my way around Cancun via bars. I didn't really know much about alcohol at the time, but I was from Long Island and eastern end of Long Island. So I decided to start ordering drinks called Long Island iced teas. Let's just say that after 2 or 3 of those, my dad decided to pick me up off the beach because it was nap time.
To say the least.
The next morning wasn't so much fun.
Let's see. As for me, I guess craft has to be used very loosely, as I've only just gotten into the craft aspect of this cocktail making. But I remember from a very young age being at my grandparents' house. We had a family farm in Lebanon, and we were in the red room, we called it, because it had a red couch, I guess. And my grandfather teaching me how to make rum and cokes. And my grandmother chiming in, remember now, when you have house guests, never let their drinks go more than half empty. So I was like, always running around that. And I mean, here I am as mixologist, and that's come in handy. But I guess for crafting, I was probably about 5 to 7 when learning how to make what I now know is a very strong rum and coke. But yeah, and craft side, I guess that came about probably in Boston. I went to Back Bar, which is a really cool place, and I've had great experiences since then.
I'll do both, beer and...
Okay, go for it.
Beer, probably 6 years old, sitting with my father. He'd pour me what probably ended up being a 4-ounce glass of Schlitz back in the 50s. So that's my first beer memory. First spirit memory, probably a couple years later. It was a rum, just because it was sweet. My parents always had a very elaborate bar at the house. I think there was 12 bar stools and 6 or 7 tape. My parents did a lot of entertaining. And, my father would put tape on the bottle and hit it with a marker. And I would just slide the tape down on the bottle. And, I was known to have a nip now and then when I was growing up. Never got inebriated until probably junior high.
At least you held off.
And then it was at my sister's wedding. We were drinking Jack Daniels and beer, and we got up on the roof of the house, and there was a built-in pool in the backyard, and I can remember throwing the empty cans off the roof into the pool, not thinking that people were going to see the empty cans being launched off the roof into the pool. And then being grabbed by my father and saying, I can help you get off this roof really fast. And so, I got grounded for a while.
Okay, Amanda, you're up.
So growing up, I guess you could consider me a pretty straight-edged girl, so I never really dabbled into drinking or anything until going into college. So go to college, join the swim team, you train really hard, and you party really hard. So my first experience was a bottle of vodka, drank half of it, shot after shot after shot, because I'm like, I'm not feeling it. And being on the swim team, I was extremely lean, and it hit me really hard. So I can drink Wiggly Bridge vodka now, but I couldn't go near it at all since then.
Yeah, there's a particular smell that the raspberry vodka has.
Oh, no.
Yeah. This one has lemon, so I consider it cologne.
Yeah, there's a horrible smell. All right, so we're going to move quickly right into our final round. We're gonna change things up a little bit today. Round 4 is a random questions one, and I actually had a fellow podcaster reach out and say that she had these cards that she had for her show, and each card is numbered and it corresponds with an episode of the show, 1,000 Things to Talk About. What's really cool about the show is it's only a couple minutes long, and it can be found on all of your podcast catchers, and you can also find them on Facebook and Twitter at Muse Topics. But what's really cool is it's just a stack of cards with conversation starters on it. So I have a handful here. I'm just going to randomly pick one, say the question, and then we can all kind of discuss it for just a few minutes before we wrap it up.
Sounds good.
All right. So this one, whatever this one is what it's going to be. It's number 20. It's not... We're just going to go with it and say for it. It's emotional, then physical, or physical, then emotional. It starts tiptoeing on the risque side. I think most times in my life where it's worked out, emotional has definitely come first. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I have strictly done that. It's a very off-topic question, I understand.
For me, that it comes, the first words that came into my head, what mindset?
Yeah.
Because to me, mindset would mean that I have been presented with something that I have to react to,
right,
which is going to cause physical, and then the emotional would be the second part of the act. And there's other things that will pop up to where it will be emotional that may cause a physical response, typically a tragedy or a love. So I look at that card as being an oxymoron.
Yeah. I like that interpretation of it. I definitely think as a person in general, no matter what, I'm emotionally driven. Like that is the first thing. And then whatever the physical ramifications will be of that are what follows. It's interesting that you think that it's an oxymoron, though. That's really an interesting perspective. Anyone else have anything else to add?
After you, Amanda.
I don't, actually.
You'll pass.
But you can be emotional.
I know that as a parent, I definitely tend more on the emotional than physical side. But I think before parenthood, I feel like I was more physical in everything, and I just know I can relate to everything being more emotional as a parent on the most basic level of my creativity, because I know that a lot of my creativity came from all of my emotional everything in my life, and then since being a mom, my creativity in my writing, my blogs, my cocktail making, well, now it's getting much better again, just working at it, but a lot of that creative space was taken up, like, how can I occupy a 2-year-old? And like you got to be creative after a while. Like,
right, otherwise
you can only
go crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's only so much you can handle talking about Elmo.
Right, I know. And here.
Were you going to add anything?
If I have to be on the spot, I guess I would say...
You don't have to do anything.
I guess I would say that I would stay with the physical then emotional when we're talking about cocktails, just because it's... you drink and then you get emotional? No. You tend to enjoy something physically and then develop an emotional attachment to it on the cocktail side of the house, or at least the craft side of the house.
Yeah, I like that interpretation as well. I think that, if we just think about the tasting, there was a very physical reaction before, and now I love you guys. Like, I already was telling my husband on my way, I'm like, dude, those guys are great. I'm really excited, but I didn't necessarily want to just drink your stuff straight up.
But just wait until we have...
I'm so scared.
Now we have to have you and your husband come down for one of the cocktail classes.
Oh, yeah. He'll love that. So who's babysitting? On that note, I think we should wrap up because I probably should get home. There's kids at home waiting for me. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Amanda.
I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Yes.
It has been so enlightening, and I'm so excited about this. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been fun.
Cheers. Cheers to you.
Thank you so much to the gang at Wiggly Bridge for enlightening me. I really need to get more of that vodka. It was life-changing. Thank you, listeners, for joining me on another adventure. Head to greatbeeradventure.com/podcast for Justin's take on today's episode and for links to Wiggly Bridge and to our free coloring page. Until next time, get out there and try something new. Chat soon, friends. If you all, our fabulous co-adventurers, would like to support the show, check out our Patreon page. For less than the cost of a beer, you can show us some love. Go to greatbeeradventure.com/support. If you want to see even more from our adventures, follow us on Instagram @GreatBeerAdventure. And be sure to subscribe to the show. That way, you won't miss a thing. Great Beer Adventure is part of the Great Pint Society. Cheers.